Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake.
And this week we're going to be talking to Andrew Aydin about his upcoming spiritual sequel to the March trilogy, appropriately named Run, which he does with Representative John Lewis, and artist Afua Richardson. What else do we talk? So in the denouement, we talk about our birthdays. Chris saw the Meg.
The Meg.
Jake has read a shit ton more Punisher, and we talk about like concerts we've seen. Like,
a
lot
of music talk.
A lot of music talk. I think the impetus is I kind of like ran into Alex Leahy after a show at Rock and Roll Hotel, and so we talk about that and other things.
Andrew, you and the Congressman Lewis are reteaming, also with Afua Richardson and also Nate Powell doing some segments on a kind of a spiritual sequel to the March trilogy with Run through Abrams sometime next year. I was kind of curious, was there always kind of that plan in the back of your pocket to kind of follow up March and kind of take it beyond Montgomery and kind of take it to Capitol Hill and kind of the beginnings of the congressman's political career?
Yeah, early on, I mapped this all out on a dry erase board of all things.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of
that's very comics.
Where you you put out it was like where I put my master plan, and I sort of had dates and everything by it. And when we originally thought of March, we thought about it running through 1968, but then it seemed like to the congressman that the Voting Rights Act was the signing of it was really to him when the movement ended, right? And so that became the natural end point for March. We'd always talked about if we wanted to that I could put together a significant amount of material, especially after the experience of book 2 and book 3, that it would be a compelling and important book. And I think, everything that's happened
sure
over the last couple of years, gave it a newfound importance. And as I worked on the research for it, sort of behind the scenes while we were finishing up book 3, and while book 3's, that I don't even know what you call it, but that roller coaster ride that was book 3 happened, it became apparent that there was a great many emotional inflection points that hadn't been covered in other works.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is sort of out there, the opening scene of Run is John Lewis getting arrested. Totally, it's like a total March scene, right? He leads a protest to a church to integrate. This is 2 days after the signing of the Voting Rights Act, and he gets arrested and goes to jail.
Right.
But what sort of was lost in these narratives, and really that's not a arrest that's really talked about, like the effort down in Americus, Georgia, and things like that. And that particular campaign and all the work that was done in South Georgia. And then that night, while the congressman was in jail, the Klan leads their largest hooded march through downtown Americus.
Mm-hmm.
It was the largest hooded march in Georgia in at least a decade, if not longer, right?
Yeah.
And it became apparent that as we discuss when did the attacks on the Voting Rights Act happen, when we discuss how long has this simmering racial tension that is spilling out in the open, how long has it been simmering, those sort of stories showing that the Klan began using the tactics of the movement immediately after the signing of the voting rights fills in a gap, I think, in our collective understanding of what the struggle for equality, for racial equality, for economic equality has been like. It wasn't, in fact, the narrative that it ended with, these triumphant marches. That in fact, the struggle became, how do you translate those legal protections through that the movement secured through the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, and other legislation? Mm-hmm. How do you use that? And that became the struggle after Selma in many ways, and it's the struggle today. And so we're trying to fill in those gaps in people's understanding and show them that there is a direct linear connection to the events of 65, 66, 67, 68 to what's happening today. In fact, we are all a part of that same struggle. The civil rights movement was the culmination of decades, if not centuries, of fighting for equality, in accommodation, from slavery through Reconstruction and Jim Crow. I mean, the civil rights movement in many ways was a culmination of a long-term effort. And now the struggle to use those protections that the civil rights movement brought about is still this long struggle that we're trying to reach a culminating point where every person in America has the right to vote, equal access to the ballot, and the same economic protections that Dr. King and others were fighting for, sure. Right? And what the vote can be used for. But at the same time, run is about how you pick yourself back up after you've been knocked down, because it's also about John Lewis being kicked out of SNCC, being ousted as chairman by Stokely Carmichael, and being rejected by his peers, and not being considered radical enough after being considered one of the most radical student leaders of the movement. And again, I think this is something we can all relate to with everything that's happened, because the ground has shifted in a tectonic way, and it's important for all of us to have historic context for how other great people were able to survive.
Well, I think that's indicative to a lot. Not just in fiction, but just in general. The heroes I always had, the heroes I always looked up to, weren't the guys that necessarily came out swinging. They were the guys that could pick themselves up after they went down hard. You see that with, Captain America, right? That dude grew up as like the biggest runt in like the Lower East Side, and becomes the greatest soldier that the world ever knows. You see that in like real life examples. You certainly see that within the movement. And you're right. I think something that gets left out of like the Selma narrative or the March to Washington or any of that is that on a sociological level, it's Isaac Newton outside of physics. For every action, there is an equal or opposite reaction. We're seeing that now. We saw that in the 60s. We saw that with the end of the Civil War, with the creation of racist groups like the KKK, and President Grant having to send federal troops to the South. It's interesting to me, because I remember you had first gotten into comics because your mom, didn't she buy you like a copy of like Uncanny X-Men from the spinner rack and like a Piggly Wiggly?
Yeah, it was my grandmother, and it's just down the street from where I'm at now.
Yeah. And that has a lot of parallels too, right? You see that with, specifically the X-Men. They constantly are working for a world that will hate and fear them, and yet that never distracts, Scott Summers and Professor Charles Xavier from the bigger fight. And I think there's a lot of parallels within March, and I'm assuming a lot of parallels within Run as well. But when you first pitched this to John, to the congressman, I don't know him familiarly, but when you first, what made the comic book medium the medium that you wanted to do this all in?
There for my own reasons, I thought that the story would do well in comics, just because of my understanding of the potential of the medium. Because, you grow up with it, and you come to understand the visual narrative, and then basically the internet happened, right?
Sure.
And it just seemed like why wouldn't you do this, right? And with the example of Martin Luther King and the Montgomery story being put in front of me by the congressman, it just seemed self-evident. Why wouldn't you? I mean, in a sense, I guess there's always that question of like, oh man, they should do a movie about John Lewis and the movement, and you're like, dude, you can't fit this in 120 minutes.
Yeah.
And okay, so then where can you really tell all of it? How can you include all the facts and the details, but also show and demonstrate the drama through visual means? And comics are the only outlet that we have. That's why, comics are a medium, not a genre, right? And you have to tell stories in comics that utilize the medium, that are appropriate for the medium. It's not just a vehicle for translating a story that would otherwise show up on screen. And I think the more I got to know the congressman and what he did as a young man, it seemed almost like it was a heroic version of Forrest Gump crossed with Gandhi. Where like here he's leading this nonviolent life, but also at the same time he's in the mix of virtually every major campaign, student-led campaign for 5 years, right? From Nashville all the way to Selma, the sit-in movement, the Freedom Rides, the March on Washington. I mean, all that sort of stuff. And then at the same time, like, I was sort of frustrated because I had grown up in Atlanta and I had heard the stories of Dr. King and Rosa Parks. They'd taken me to the King Center all these times as a kid, and yet nobody had told me the story of SNCC. And so a lot of it was thinking about, well, okay, when I was 10, well, how would it have been good for you to teach me the movement more thoroughly? How would I have been able to learn all those facts? And it was like, you should have put a comic book in front of me about it, and not a comic book that just tells me the facts, but like make it a narrative. Like make this from someone's perspective. Show me the inside, the fighting, all the things that like we go through as human beings. Don't sanitize this. Show me the messy, dirty human bits of it on all sides, and be honest about it. And I think, that's where you come from, It's such an important story, and there's all these reasons, but at the end of the day, it's about that this is a story that works better in the comics medium than just about anywhere else, because the visual of it is so important. But if you leave out the facts, you leave out the details, then you lose so much of the story and so much of the understanding of how it worked. And the gift to be able to do almost 600 pages of story, right? Like that in and of itself, we got to do 600 pages of detailed story about the civil rights movement and have it be published, period. You know what I mean? Like in comics, that had never been done. And that was such that's important that we were able to do that. Yeah,
absolutely. I feel like it took Image 15 years to realize they just didn't have to do knockoff Spider-Man and the X-Men, it's like, oh, we can do more than Spawn and Youngblood. It's like, no, totally, guys. But and I love Image. I work with those guys a lot. But I think the idea of historical stories being in comics is kind of in its own. John's a revolutionary in multiple formats. To that point, he is very much the POV character in the March trilogy. On the one hand, he's a hero, but on the other hand, he's a regular guy because you guys get to know him. You never really get to know Dr. King, probably because he's been, he's been tragically dead for 50 years now. 50 years since this past April, and I think the thing about John is you've effectively humanized him. You haven't deified the congressman. He's a character that lives in a very scared time and a very frightful time, and yet he knows that facing not facing his fears is going to hurt a lot worse in the grand scheme. He sees the bigger picture. One question I had: you're picking up Afua Richardson for Run. What led to but you're keeping on Nate Powell in an artistic capacity as well. What led to picking up Afua?
Well, Nate had just come out with his new book, Come Again. I want to make sure that gets mentioned because it's really fantastic. And he wanted to work on his personal books, and I totally understand, man. We took over his life for far longer than he ever intended to. And also, there's a real emotional toll to doing these books. I think Nate and I both ended up in the hospital at least once each while we were making these, just because living with a lot of this pain and violence is really difficult. And Afua was somebody who I got to know through several of West Coast and East Coast comics events, and I was just always impressed with the way she related to kids and how much time she spent with them. And as we were looking around to see who might be a good partner for this, that was really important to me. And, I think she does a brilliant job with likenesses, and that's going to be important, particularly as we deal with characters in a briefer capacity as we do with Run. We're not going to, it's not the same group of people. A lot of these people left the movement, and so we have to introduce a lot of new characters. And so I liked her ability to do that, and I think she could really be a significant and powerful voice in comics.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's done a lot of work before, but at the same time, this is a lot different.
Oh, absolutely. I had followed her. Speaking of Image, she had done the Genius miniseries over at Image Top Cow with Mark Bernardin and Adam Freeman, and which is a completely different book than March. Right. But no, I'm a fan, so I'm interested because you guys are Is there you were saying so? This literally starts days after book 3 ends.
I think I was actually. Oh, you mean the storyline? Yeah, it picks up 2 days after the signing of the Voting Rights Act. Yeah. So that last scene that you have, and then it's 2 days later. He's in Americus, Georgia. Which I think is something, again, when you talk about recontextualizing history, remember, John Lewis went to the White House, got a pen, the president gave it to him from signing this act that he was beaten for to bring about, and 2 days later he's down in Americus, Georgia, getting arrested again.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. You got to explain that, shoot, man, even when you have a victory, a great victory, like the signing of the Voting Rights Act, it doesn't mean that the struggle is over. You pick right back up and you get back to work.
Well, yeah, there's no struggle. There's no end point, I feel like, in a job, in a relationship, or anything. You always have to recontextualize, reevaluate. And, there's this, those are pretty frivolous compared to literally getting beaten and jailed, apropos of nothing. But, I think with the civil rights movement, especially when the congressman's getting the support from the sources that he had before, you're seeing it's a commitment to his quality of character and his strength of character. And do you plan to do it across? I know this is kind of a big ambitious question, but do you plan to do Run over 3 volumes like March?
I think we could. I think it just depends on stamina.
Yeah.
Really, I've been doing this since 2008.
Yeah.
So I've been working on these books for 10 years.
Yeah. I'm basically asking you in the middle of a marathon if you want to run another marathon.
Right. So, it's important, and that's part of what keeps me going. And so I don't want to say, we'll do this or we'll do that. I think it just depends on how everybody feels, what we're producing, how it's going,
mm-hmm.
But I think, we could do pretty easily 3 books, do another 3 or 4, maybe even 500 pages.
Oh, wow. Damn.
But yeah, well, that's the thing, man. It's like, it's funny because I hear from a lot of editors, they're like, usually people turn in scripts in their short pages, and I always turn in scripts that are way over.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you know, I'm a researcher at heart in many ways. And
well, wasn't your graduate thesis on the Montgomery movement?
Yeah, on the Montgomery story, the comic book. I wrote the first history of it for my graduate thesis.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, well, yeah, I always think how the reaction I got when I pitched it the first time, you know, and this is Georgetown University, very serious.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I want to do my comic book thesis. And they're all like, do you think you could really write 100 pages on that? I'm like, yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky because, you know, people like Sylvia Rohr and Eddie Campbell really helped me along the way, even back then, because I was working on March at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And they helped me answer a lot of the questions that people had for a long time about, you know, how it was made, who actually made it, all these sort of things. And it turned out the theory that Eddie and the Digital Comics Museum folks and I came up with was right. It turned out to be, it was Cy Berry who was the artist.
Oh wow!
So stuff like that, you know, where you're like, man, it's crazy. It's like, feels like a lifetime ago. You know?
It does.
It really does.
Well, you know, I always wonder about that. Like, you know, obviously this is in a lot of ways your life's work, and yet you're like not that old. So you have other works to do, you know. But like, you look at guys like Tom King writing Sheriff of Babylon, which is like loosely based on his experiences in Iraq, and it's like, how, like, this, it's a story. Both March and Sheriff were stories that for the both of you had been just sitting, and you had unconsciously been writing literally for years.
You know what's funny about that is Tom King and I are neighbors.
Oh yeah.
So maybe it's something in the water. I don't know. I talk to him every so often. I saw him in San Diego.
Sure.
And, we're like, why do we only see each other in other cities?
Yeah. Are you doing Baltimore next month?
Nah, I'm not really doing any shows this year. I did San Diego and I did AwesomeCon, and that was it.
Yeah.
I've got, what it is, you know, my mother died last year.
I remember, yeah.
Between that and March and all that, the drama that caused through my life, you know, I'm spending, I have to take, because my grandmother died right before my mother died. It was just a terrible, tough year.
Sure.
And so I'm still settling both of their estates, because there's other, my mom had a brother and all this other sort of stuff, and it's turning out to be quite a lot of work. And so just this year is about healing for me.
Yeah.
I've been, some of my friends have been teasing me that I'm having a little bit of a midlife crisis, you know?
Oh yeah.
I'm turning 35 this year, and it's a little early, but at the same time, like, I've had 2 whole careers already, really, you know, 12 years on the Hill, 10 years of writing comics.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember, but yeah, you and I kind of commiserated over our lost moms at San Diego last year.
Yeah, that's right. I was a mess, man.
Dude, I've literally been there. I mean, I didn't get a tractor when that happened, but you know.
Hey man, there is a real thing to the therapy of mowing.
There, for me, it's cooking, music, and dancing. Those are the three things. I play guitar. Like, I'm actually supposed to play guitar up here in the DC area, like, and do an open mic at Fairfax. And I've got like a whole little set list and everything. But yeah, just being on stage or just moving to music is kind of what does it for me. That and the fact that I don't have I rent, so I don't have a yard big enough to mow.
Oh yeah. Well, this is Mama's yard, so I'm mowing that. Which is, I gotta, you know, sometimes I have to just laugh about it, because she would be making so much fun of me that she finally got me to come down and mow her lawn.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, this is a big place, you know, she's got fields and stuff. So I have this, like, have an 84-inch mowing deck on the back of a 39 horsepower tractor.
Yeah.
Like, and that takes me about, I don't know, 18 hours to mow the whole thing.
Damn.
Yeah, it's insane. And like, I don't know, just sitting up there, like, I can think about things, and
it's just you in the country, man. It's just you in the grass.
Well, and it gives me time to sort of come up with ideas to write about things, and you know, it's good to have that reflection time in my life. But you know, I'll get back on the road next year.
You got to do Heroes over in Charlotte in June. That's a fun show.
Oh yeah, everybody says great things about it.
Yeah, plus they have a Bojangles in the convention center, so you know.
Those biscuits are deadly.
They are. Every time I'm in Union Station, I have to stop by the Bojangles, no matter what time of the day it is. That's like ritual at this point. But you know, last year you had done a feature as part of the Bitch Planet anthology. I was wondering, outside, and I don't know if you can talk about any of this, but do you have any projects? And I know you're in the middle of a huge project, in addition to, you know, running a farm. But do you have any projects outside of Run that you got percolating?
Yeah, I mean, I've got. So there's one OGN, original graphic novel, that I'm working on that hasn't been announced yet, and then there's a nonfiction book that I've partnered with someone to work on, and both of those will hopefully be announced next year, once we're a little bit further along on both fronts, and then there's a couple like fun just comic series that I'm doing short stories for, or that I'm talking to the editors about doing short stories for, and you know, it's why I did Bitch Planet, it's why I did X-Files, it's why I sort of contribute to these anthologies around. I just, you know, there's things that I see, there's things that I experience, and I want to be able to tell them as a story to other people, and I love finding outlets for that, because I keep these notebooks of just like things that really happen in my life, and then you find ways to use those to create fiction, to use them as inspiration. There's so many stories from the farm now that like I want to tell people. Like I had to explain to my friend, I was like, I mowed 16 acres in 2 days, and he was like, is that good? And I'm like, dude, that's like telling somebody that you did the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs. Like it's a big deal. And it's like, so I'm like translating farming, you know, experiences into nerd speak. And I don't know, all of that. It's just, it's great to have creative outlets.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
I got a bunch of stuff cooking. We'll see if I ever finish again.
Have you ever read Essex County by Jeff Lemire?
Oh, of course, man. That was an early read. And it was, you know, I mean, he did that, like, when he was, I mean, that when you think about how early that book came in his career,
yeah,
it's an incredibly impressive work all by itself.
Yeah.
But then you're like, Jeff did that when he was so young and just starting out, and you're like, man, that was incredible. Because, you know, Jeff was one of those guys who came out of the Top Shelf family, right? The old school, when Top Shelf still had the booth at San Diego, and it was sort of a shape of an O, and everybody sat behind their book and signed, and like, I mean, that was like Murderer's Row of comic creators. It was insane. You had like Rob Venditti, you had Jeff Kent, Jeff Lemire, Shannon Wheeler, Mark Russell, Jeffrey Brown, all at one San Diego con, just like hanging out. Craig Thompson, like I can remember them all doing signings together at that in 2012.
Yeah,
and I'm sitting there with like my mini comic, being like, "I'm gonna be a big deal too, guys. I promise, I'm gonna be huge. Just you wait. My mini comic's gonna tear up the world, you know." And they were so nice. Oh, Eddie Campbell, that was the other one who was there, and he was just the nicest guy to me. And like,
it helps that they're all Canadian, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of Canadians in that mix.
I always, for me, like, it's Essex County and Donny Cates' God Country, Like those are.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very different books, but they're coming from such like one's a West Texas fairy tale, and Jeff Lemire's like slice of life, like Western Ontario farm story. So yeah, I feel like you have a Tar Heel State story somewhere in you.
Me and my tractor, the story of my life.
Well, I'm trying to think what it would be like. You would have to infuse like some sort of like magic realism in it. There would be like shades of Field of Dreams, but instead of like baseball, or maybe because that starts out in albeit a cornfield, but that starts out in a field too. So there's like some sort of I'm trying to think what that equivalent would be, what the hook is.
Well, right now I'm growing pumpkins, so it could be a little bit Charlie Brown Halloween.
Yeah, or you could throw in some Ray Bradbury with the October Country.
Yeah, well, and I'm out in apple country, so there's just apple orchards all around.
Dang. But, yeah. Andrew, I don't know if you remember, but something we ask everybody that comes on our fine program, what are you currently geeking out over?
There was something fun just the other day I was really getting into. I've been reading all the Thrawn Thrawn books, the new Timothy Zahn stuff. I am a sucker for Star Wars novels. But Zahn, I've been reading since I was a kid, and getting these new Thrawn books is amazing. So I've been enjoying that. Mm-hmm. The other thing I've been really enjoying are the Rick and Morty comics.
Sure. We've had Kyle Starks on like 4 times.
Say again?
We've had Kyle Starks on like 4 times.
Oh, that's awesome. I've been really enjoying that. It's like, they're good. And then, you know what? This is sinful. I shouldn't admit I did this. I bought the Jabba's sail barge. I backed that.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you saw that Hasbro Labs 4-foot Jabba sail barge. Yeah, I did that.
Are you gonna put it like in the barn or something? Like it's like.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah. It's coming out here, man. I'm gonna set it up. It's gonna be nice.
You could put it under put it in the barn and cover it with a sheet, like the ship that took Superman to Kansas. Like his baby vessel. It's about the same size.
Build the barn is it's like a dirt barn, so I could take the sand and make like a whole Tatooine around it.
Yeah, get some dewbacks.
Yeah, why not? I can make a little Sarlacc pit and probably end up being a snake in it for real, and you'd be like, oh shoot, rattlesnake ate my Star Wars figure.
I have to ask, what are your thoughts? Do you like OG Sarlacc pit, or do you like special edition with a weird beak thing coming out of it?
Oh no, dude! It's got to be a Muppet.
just a hole.
Sarlacc is just like this mean Muppet. It's like the one that Jim Henson was like, yeah, I don't think the kids are gonna like that Sarlacc, and then he like offers it up, and Frank Oz is over there like, oh, I got this. This will be perfect.
Yeah,
he eats Boba Fett,
Which I always hated, right? Because like they build Boba Fett to be this like huge deal, and he's taken out by a blind guy that isn't even trying at the end of the day.
Yeah, it wasn't the best death.
Have you enjoyed the new films? I mean, you had mentioned the Parsecs earlier. Did you enjoy Solo?
I haven't seen Solo yet. I'm like really behind in a bunch of these movies. I haven't seen Solo. I haven't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp. I think the last one I saw was Infinity War and Black Panther. Yeah, because it was like people were having social outings for it, so I was like, yeah, I'll tag along. Like I'll go. That'll be fun.
Sure.
And the rest of my time has either been spent like writing or out here working, or the other thing I've been spending a lot of time on lately is visiting correctional facilities for juvenile and young adults. Mm-hmm. That's something I've really become passionate about the last 2-3 years. I've had the opportunity to visit more than half a dozen facilities around the country and speak to the kids. They usually do like some sort of reading program with March. There's 2 facilities in DC and the surrounding area that I've spent some time at, both the DC jail and then the Alexandria facility.
Sure.
In Alexandria, which is it's one of those things that it puts in perspective all the other things that I'm working on. And in some ways, I feel like I get more out of it than the kids do. I give them everything I have, but at the end, they fill me with joy. Because you never know. Like, you go in there, they're just kids, and they've made mistakes, but, like, they're also in a system that's stacked against them. And I feel so much empathy because, you know, I was raised by a single mom. Like, I was one bad day away from being in that same situation. And I feel like the thing that I can offer them, at least, is in some small way some coping tactics and some things that they can work on reading and writing and how to make comics and how to write and how to tell a story that will help them spend their time in a better way. And I love getting the letters from the kids. It means the world to me. And I've just really become passionate about that. I really enjoy doing that, and I try and go as often as I can.
You know, I think, you know, we of course had kind of talked about growing up reading the X-Men, or, you know, I think at the end of the day, things like, and just talking about the medium in general, but as much as I was bashing superhero comics earlier, they were there when I needed them the most. You know, in 22 pages and 4 colors, I could find, you know, maybe the last son of Krypton telling me that it wasn't the end of the world and that I'll always be stronger than I think I actually am. And maybe, you know, I mean, you're already doing the literal Lord's work, you know. I feel like it's been, the response to the March trilogy has been crazy, and you've got the awards to prove it. I mean, not that you need the validation, but the validation is always nice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always flattered by these awards because, you know, for me as a kid, like, Mama didn't believe in a participation trophy shelf. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like,
my mom didn't believe B's were good grades. She was like, "Why aren't they A's?"
Yeah, it's like
very much a tiger mom.
Call me when you get a real award, and then it's like, okay, here you go. You know?
Yeah.
And especially for so many of these awards to be from librarians, because Mama spent so much time taking me to libraries and working in libraries herself. That it really, it's like I couldn't ask for a better fan base, you know?
Yeah. Like, have you done any of the? Yeah.
My fan, I would want it to be the librarian. So that's high praise, and
yeah, the ALA shows are always interesting. I don't know if you've done any of the American Library Association.
Oh yeah, I've done many of them. They're great. I mean, the thing that people, you know, don't realize is how much fun librarians are to hang out with.
Oh, they know how to party. Yeah.
They're like, this is a very docile group of people, and you're like, I don't know what librarians you've been hanging out with.
Yeah, I love librarians. But yeah, you and I, speaking of which, you and I have to do this outside of comic book shows and podcast interviews one of these days, dude.
Yeah, totally, man. We're gonna get out there and tear it up sometime. We got to.
Maybe bring Tom King. We'll get like coffee or something.
Tom King doesn't even get coffee with me by myself, and he lives down the street from me. I don't know. He's a big deal, man. I can't compete with Tom. The closest I've gotten is I've interviewed like Scott Snyder. That's like who I'm aware is a completely different person, but like in terms of Batman writers. But yeah, man. Yeah. Before I return you to the wilds of North Carolina, anything else you want to plug before I let you go? No, well, I hope everybody checks out Nate's new book. I think it's really, really cool. It's very much a Nate Powell book, and I think it's really great to see how strong he is as a storyteller in the fiction space. And you know, for me, it's I'll have some more stuff soon. Just hang in there. Run is going to be great. It's a lot of work, as they all are, but I'm really excited about doing some of my own stories and doing some more fiction. And really doing a long form fiction book is something I'm really, really excited about.
Does Run have a tentative release date?
Yeah, I mean, sometime next summer.
Okay, you know? Cool. Yeah. It's gonna clean up, man. It's gonna come right when we need it the most.
let's hope, you know?
Yeah.
Let's hope. But I appreciate it, man. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, always good.
Thanks for giving me a little time.
Yeah, anytime, man.
Always good talking to Andrew. You know, he's a local boy too. He lives right there in D.C. So it's me and him really need to hang out outside of comic book conventions and podcast interviews one of these days. Anyway, so what'd you boys get into?
I finished the Marvel Knights Ennis Punisher run, which has been a while now. Going back to the Welcome Back Frank stuff, those 12 issues, which is pretty damn great. And then basically, there's a couple fill-in issues, different writers, and so it's like 30 some issues that he ends up doing. Garth Ennis ends up doing. It's great. I mean, you can see elements of where he would talk about later on. It got a little too goofy and a little too like wild. There are definitely some elements of that, but there's still some freaking really great Punisher issues in there. Really great stories, really great moments. If you're a Spider-Man, Daredevil, or Wolverine fan, it's going to be a little tough because any superhero that shows up, which is pretty much and the Hulk's in there too. Ennis doesn't like superheroes, and it shows. I mean, Spider-Man in his first appearance is used as a shield to take punches to save Frank Castle's life, and then he just tosses them aside. Some pretty great stuff in there, but it's great, and there's still some really kind of like bittersweet moments in there, and it's crazy to think that Ennis is just getting started. Like he does reinvents not reinvents, but brings Frank back to basics. Where you get Welcome Back Frank, just back to him just being Frank Castle.
Because before that in the comics, he was like literally the Angel of Vengeance.
Yeah, and so just back to him in the if Garth was going to put him in the outfit, it was going to be the all black with the skull on the chest. Sorry, no boots and white gloves, which I know we love. But and the trench coat kind of deal. Excuse me.
Ammo teeth.
Yeah, ammo teeth, baby. And then you think you're like, wow,
he's not in his Speedo from the swimsuit issue.
No, unfortunately not. And then you're like, Jesus, man, this guy like
that actually exists, by the way. Chris just was making that up.
Yeah.
Google search Punisher swimsuit.
And then he goes into his Max run, which is where he really freaking lets loose. And really does whatever he wants to great effect. Really defines the Punisher and really the Punisher run if you're looking for that. But I feel like Marvel Knights is a really great intro into that because it's still super violent and intense and unrelenting. It's just instead of seeing mother loving all the time, it's motherfucker in the Max run. Like there's a lot of that kind of like you can't curse that much in the Marvel Knights. They right off the bat in the first Max story with him taking out basically an entire fucking mob at a birthday party. Pretty fucking violent.
And then all the stragglers at the funeral.
Yeah, it's just he goes fucking off, baby. And it's awesome. I highly recommend any and all Ennis because he really he Frank Millered it, he Alan Moore'd it. He Grant Morrison'd it, which is to say, took a character that he didn't create and really defined him and made that character who he is today, and or at least largely responsible for it. So that was cool. I'm now going back and doing a lot of like early Punisher stuff. I've read some like the Circle of Blood, that was a 5-issue mini back in the day. So yeah, now I'm reading everything else. So there's still plenty of Punisher out there, and looking forward to checking it out.
I caught a film known as The Meg.
Oh shit! Yes,
I was highly entertained because it is a dumb monster shark movie, and like they've all been dumb. Like even Jaws was dumb. Well done. But it's still a dumb monster movie essentially, where the monster is a shark. And the best parts about it are accidental, in my opinion. But that's a film school rant to go on at some point. But no, it was a dumb action summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
With a giant shark in it and Jason Statham.
I have to credit the Meg. If that movie hadn't come out, I wouldn't have gotten to write like a think piece on the Jaws movies.
There you go.
For CBR. And by the time this thing posts, I'm in the middle of writing, because that was so many people dug that. I'm in the middle of writing a think piece on Sharknado, and that's fucking rough.
Yeah, there's not too much thinking involved in Sharknado. My spectrum of like shark movies, it starts with Jaws is up top. Don't think that I'm ragging on Jaws. Jaws is still the best, but then there's a wide gap, and you have like Jaws 2. And then like everything else,
Deep Blue Sea, motherfucker.
Okay, I'll give you that. Deep Blue Sea is within that gap.
That is a stupid monster movie.
Yeah,
that is the stupid shark monster movie.
Yeah, and the Meg, in my opinion, is right up there with it. Even tries at one point or another to have kind of a Deep Blue Sea moment, if you catch my drift.
I got you.
Does LL Cool J kill a shark with an oven?
Yes. That's exactly what I mean.
You killed my bird. It's my favorite moment in Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, it's a good moment.
Everybody cites Samuel L. Jackson's death. It's LL Cool J killing the shark that ate his bird.
For me, it's the because remember in the beginning, Thomas Jane like dodges the shark, and it's like bad. Actually, oh fuck, this guy is like the real deal. And the end where like the main chick tries to do it and gets eaten, and Thomas Jane watches it happen. Like, you gotta train for that shit.
Yeah,
lady,
you can't just do it.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, but yeah, no, it was a very fun movie. Insider information: I did get quite toasty at a bar beforehand, so that could very well have added to my enjoyment level. But also, anyone that knows me knows that I enjoy a good mindless movie. So I feel like I probably would have enjoyed it either way. Joy, who went with me, friend of the show, Joy, she also got a bit toasty at the bar and fell asleep during the climax.
During the climax?
Yeah, right? So, take that with a grain of, or take that into consideration as well. But yeah, Jason Statham does a great job. Ruby Rose from Orange is the New Black fame and soon to be from Batwoman fame did a great job in it as well. Rainn Wilson plays a billionaire, and I believe it, a wackadoo billionaire who owns the underwater research facility that you see in the trailer, who is I guess, to put it in like Jaws terms, is like probably the equivalent of like the mayor. Yeah, slash all the people that like go out to try to catch the shark with like dynamite. Quite literally, actually.
Just sorry, real quick.
Yeah,
because we're talking about shark stuff. Like, I rewatched Jaws on July 4th.
Oh, good call.
It's the July 4th movie, or one of the July 4th movies. I guess the other being born on the 4th of July.
Yeah,
not Independence Day.
Yeah. Fucking Jaws, man. Like, that, it's out of control how good that movie is.
It's my dad's favorite film.
Absurd how good that movie is, and especially the moment, like the show me the way to go home, boom, boom, I'm tired, and I want, like, that whole thing with the Scar and the USS Indianapolis. Just that by itself is like a one act you can just perform.
Oh yeah,
and it's just
And then Jaws 2. Say ah.
Although I dig Jaws 2, but like
you fuck with Jaws 2?
Yes. I saw it and I said I'm fucking with you, Jaws 2.
Did you know that since we're talking about Jaws, I'll just invoke the rest of the series. Did you know that one of the original ideas for Jaws 3 was to become basically like intentionally become a parody of itself, and like the plot was a film crew was filming Jaws 3 and then get attacked by an actual shark whilst filming it.
I did. But now you at home do too.
Yeah. And anyone else that watched that What Culture video last week.
Yeah. Or read my Jaws think piece available on CBR.
That's true. That's true. I should probably read more.
I won't include the links. I won't whore myself out that much.
I also went to Atlantic City with friend of the show Joy. It was her birthday this past weekend.
Interesting. I'll have something to talk about birthdays too.
Yeah, she wanted to do something for her birthday, so we did something. And yeah, it was, we spent a day. Did most of it on the beach. Did a little bit of gambling. I didn't partake in the gambling. But beach was nice.
Yeah.
Didn't get eaten by a shark.
Pretty good weekend weather-wise too.
Very good week. We left right when rain started. How about you, Samuel?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Christopher. This weekend was a birthday for Jake and myself as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we did that separately.
Mm-hmm.
You worked.
Yeah.
The traditional Jake Bozick birthday.
Kind of. I mean, a couple days before I saw Alex Leahy at the Rock and Roll Hotel in D.C. right there on H Street. And Leahy is one of those artists that I just think she's like so fucking cool, and she's kind of got this like, she plays a lot of indie rock and a lot of surf rock. Like her music is very summer oriented. It was kind of a good way to kind of close out the summer, and it was cool because I'd seen her play at like DC9 last year, and so for me it's always cool seeing like a band start at the ground level, like you're kind of like in on something new, like you're almost like in on the secret, and then you see them like succeed, and a lot of times the bands like don't. I think we all have either been in or have seen bands with friends and stuff. Not saying that, but like, that necessarily. But no, I mean, like she's, starting to get like play festivals like Lollapalooza and Firefly and Bonnaroo, and she's like getting recognized by like Pitchfork and Consequence of Sound and Rolling Stone. So it's been really cool. And I actually, so yeah, I saw her at Rock and Roll Hotel. I was kind of toasty because I got there a little early, and it's like happy hour until the shows actually start. And Godfather 1 and 2 was on, so I just watched both.
You were there for 4 hours?
No.
5 hours?
I was there for like 2 hours before the show started. So I saw like the last half of 1 and the first half of 2.
There you go.
But
That's all you really need, right?
Yeah. You don't get the Fredo line. But no, I mean, it was like, so after the show, I went up to the middle level of Rock and Roll Hotel, and so if you've never been there, like the actual rock venue's on the bottom. The middle is the bar, and the roof is a bar, which the roof is where I had wings, got drunk, and watched Godfather. Anyway, so like after the show, I go up to the second level, and I'm kind of like hanging briefly, with her in the band. It's the first time I've actually like met them in all the times, which I guess is to say like 3 times I've seen them. And I didn't get to ask the Darrison question. I didn't get to ask what a Darrison was. In retrospect, I think it wasn't until like Jake brought it up. I was talking to him. He's like, "So did you find out?" And I was like, "No."
There's like a pause. You're like, "Oh fuck!"
Oh fuck! I still don't know what a Darrison is, but so we're kind of sitting there in that middle level for a second, and she was like, "Hey, thanks for coming out," and I was like, "Yeah, no, it was really cool. I've seen you guys and everything," and as the night's kind of wrapping up, and I'm heading on my way out. It's actually, I got to meet the Japan Droids a couple weeks before that. So I've actually at the Rock and Roll Hotel. So like I've just steadily met all the people I look up to in music these days. But I was like, is it cool if I get your Jane Hancock? And the entire band just kind of like stops and like does the simultaneous like head tilt, like the fuck, because they're all Australian.
I honestly think that even if they're American, they would have done it too. But Australian definitely even makes it weirder.
That one's just outside of the realm where like even an American would be like,
well, no, they could still be like, I get it, but the fuck are you talking about, man?
And so yeah, they all kind of like, it's a signature. it's a John Hancock had the biggest signature on the Declaration, and like I got it, and I was like, cool.
Can I? At least you didn't go the Tommy Boy route and invoke Herbie Hancock.
Yeah.
Herbina Hancock.
Yeah. So and they're very, very friendly. I actually have a picture. I posted on my Instagram of me and Alex, so that's pretty cool. In terms of the actual birthday, I got lunch with my dad at his favorite restaurant, which is a Montana-themed saloon off Eisenhower Avenue. And then we saw Mission Impossible Fallout, which I actually enjoyed more the second time because I got to recalibrate my expectation levels. And that bathroom fight is still so fucking good.
So fucking cool. Oh, man.
And
it's not that long, though, right? Like,
no, it isn't.
It's pretty, like...
It's a concentrated dose. Yeah.
Which is a bummer, because I could have spent a little more time in there.
Yeah.
A little more time in the men's room, you know what I'm saying?
all the time.
With Cavill and Cruz.
Oh, Cavill and Cruz.
Yeah.
Best buddy cop movie ever.
CNC.
That's right. Remember Vanilla Sky, Cruz and Cruz?
Yeah. And then they dated for like a year or so.
Did they?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a pre-Javier Bardem world, but because he just doesn't exist.
He had not yet come into creation.
Yeah. And then I got to hang out with a friend of the show, Declan Shalvey, on Monday.
Nice.
He's doing a East Coast like signing tour. And I got to hang out with him up in like Columbia Park, Maryland.
It still blows my mind, like going back to like Declan, and then we had Becky, and then we've had
Declan
Becky,
on twice.
Yeah, Becky Cloonan, and then Matt Horick. Like, we had like most of that Punisher creative team on.
Yeah.
While the Punisher series, I think it was going on at one point, and then after when it was over.
Yeah.
So we
had Matt on just as it ended.
We got to talk to like one of the artists on it, the writer, and the cover artist. That's pretty fucking. That's still one of my favorite things we've ever done.
If we ever get Chris Anka, we complete the set.
It's freaking awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, and Deck's fine. I think it was his first time in D.C. He took a picture with the original Enterprise model in the National Air and Space.
I saw that. Yeah, you were like, "Hey, did you go see it?" And he just replied with the photo.
So no, I think it's only a matter of time until we get Deck back on the whirlwind of Celtic charm that is Mr. Declan Shalvey.
Yeah, he's super fun to talk to.
Yeah.
And like those fucking covers, man.
He's doing covers for Dead Man Logan.
Oh, nice.
Which is the new 12 issue.
The new team up between Logan and Dead Man from DC
yeah,
Comics.
DC.
It's that Neil Adams cover where he's like losing his shit, like, "Oh, I'm dead."
Yeah, that's all I'm known for is being dead, and I died in this stupid outfit.
Yeah. And he was alive during most of Brightest Day, and then he dies. Spoilers for like a 5-year-old comic, but actually, it was 5 years ago now.
Brightest Day was a big undertaking too. I tried to read it.
26 issues.
Yeah.
Yo!
Yeah, because
a lot of tie-ins.
Yeah. Everyone was like, "Hey," because like Blackest Night was like the biggest fucking thing they had put out in years.
Yeah,
and so they're like, "Let's keep it going." And then that didn't work, and then they're like, "Let's reboot everything," and that didn't work either.
Nope.
But no, it's like, for me, like the bittersweet thing about like the Alex Leahy show is that that's the last headlining show ever of that album cycle, and the first U.S. one was at DC9 in March of last year, which is kind of like a cool like bookend. But that means that like that era, and I always kind of feel this way about like any band that I see. I think for me mentally, like Metallica is still like Black Album Metallica.
So you're a 5-year-old?
Well, I mean, that's when I remember seeing like the music videos and shit, you know.
Sure, yeah.
I wasn't there day one when like Reload came out. I was like, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah,
maybe you were.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
I don't know. Like, what's your when you think Metallica? What's that like crystalline, like preserved image of Metallica?
Damaged Justice, 1989.
Ride the Lightning.
Good.
That's because that's the dream show.
Yeah.
Is Damaged Justice in Seattle.
But in regards to like when I like got activated or whatever, you know, like when I was like, oh, Metallica's a thing.
Yeah.
It was Reload.
Yeah. I mean,
so you're kind of right.
Yeah.
No, I get you.
Totally. It's got Fuel, right? Or is that on Load?
Fuel's on Reload.
Okay, I'm still good. But
that's why Reload was the best.
I
cannot remember any other song on Reload.
It has
I don't think they can either.
Memory Remains. That's the other big one.
Oh, okay. Kids love
there's a song called Fixer. It's the closer on that. That's probably my favorite track on the album.
Fixer.
With 3 X's.
That's how he says it too.
Yeah.
3 X's.
Ooh.
When you think the Beatles, what is it? Mop Top era, Sgt. Pepper's.
That's
Shaggier,
like impossible because it's like 3 eras I think of, which is Mob Top, like them in like glasses in the studio, like Revolver era, and then like Rooftop. You know, like psychedelic, I guess, but I don't like all that psychedelics. Like I don't like
White Album.
Yeah, like them kind of just grungy and like they're like I was talking to my buddies and obviously he's not a Beatles psychopath like we are, and so he just
few are.
Yeah, but he just enjoys the Beatles. He likes their music, but he doesn't like sit there and analyze the fuck out of everything and do 2 podcasts about them. So I was telling him, I was like, the Beatles didn't tour like the last time, and he that blew his fucking mind. Like he couldn't wrap his head around. He goes, "What do you mean?" Because I forgot. Oh, I was showing him the Rooftop thing. I was like, "That's they did like Hey Jude, here and there on like was it the Smothers Brothers?
Yeah.
Was it this? No.
Slaggers.
Welcome to
Schlagers.
Yeah, really. I think I texted that like on.
You did,
like,
yeah.
when
I could tell you were
at
intoxicated.
the Leahy night. Yeah.
Yeah. There's certain text phrases, and that's one where I'm like,
good evening and welcome to Slaggers.
Sam's having a good time. But anyway, but like they weren't after they weren't playing live, right? And he couldn't wrap his head. I'm like, dude, that's why they're so fucking insane, man. Like it's just I don't know how we got on that tangent, but yeah, I kind of think of them in like 3 eras. But I guess my favorite like look, I like them just like there's a specific look and photo that I have in my mind, and I think it's Lennon and McCartney, and they're sitting in the Revolver sessions, and they're wearing just like white, like a white button up and like khaki, dressy type pants, and they have like Buddy Holly Buddy Holly like glasses on, and they're just figuring something out.
Yeah,
and there's like a piano in the background. Like that's my favorite.
That's
look.
like honestly, yeah, because I think like Rubber Soul Revolver era.
Yeah,
for me is like Beatles.
Yeah,
for me it is the cartoon movie Yellow Submarine.
Ah, nice.
Because for probably the first 12 years of my life, that was really the only exposure to the Beatles I had.
That's how Sean Lennon figured out his dad was famous.
Mm.
Because he saw his dad. He went over to a friend's house. They watched Yellow Submarine, and he's like, "Why are you a cartoon?"
And why isn't it your voice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess they show up at the very end, right?
Yeah,
yes,
as live action faces.
Yeah. They did that to try to get out of their contract because they were contracted to be in 3 movies, and they're like, "Huh?" And they're like, "You just showed up for like not even like 2 minutes."
But we were there.
Yeah.
Well, unless you also count Michael Jackson's "Come Together." That's my favorite Beatles song, Michael Jackson's version.
At least you didn't say Aerosmith.
Oh no, no, that's the only one they play on the radio.
What is your era of the Foo Fighters? Because we were talking about the Foo Fighters over dinner.
I mean,
Learn to Fly for me.
I mean, if
it's a 3-piece.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I remember seeing like those videos and stuff, but like my favorite shit is Wasting Light.
Yeah.
That docu-series? Or just the album?
Just the album.
Yeah, that's probably second only to There's Nothing Left to Lose, which has Learn to Fly on it as my favorite Foo Fighters album. But my favorite Foo Fighter, when I think Foo Fighters, or try to pronounce it like fucking Christopher Walken.
Foo Fighters.
Yeah. Foo Fighters. Ladies and gentlemen, Foo Fighters. Is probably like the One by One era.
I was going to say that's probably my favorite single album.
What did Dave Grohl look like? I don't know.
He has
the
Foo
Fighters.
He has the light beard, and it's just a mop, like a big mop top.
Yeah, like it's just below his ears, but not quite to his shoulders.
Okay.
And yeah, it's like my beard.
Yeah,
okay.
I still think of like Pat Smear as being like newly reintegrated and back into the band.
Yeah,
he's been back in the band since the Wasting Light sessions.
Yeah.
Or no, he's been back in the band since the Echo, Silence, Patience, and Grace tour, which was 2008.
So to you, he's this reference was going to be so good, and I forgot his name. The bassist from Metallica, not the current one, but the
Jason Newsted.
Yeah, he's the Jason Newsted to you. Still the new guy.
Newsted never came back.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. We're like thinking.
No,
like,
he got too busy doing that reality show.
It was I'm like, oh yeah, like Rob is the new bassist in Metallica. He's been there since like 2003.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking,
Saint Anger sessions.
Yeah, well, he doesn't play on Saint Anger.
That's right. It's Bob Rock, isn't it?
Yeah. So good on Rob. No, whatever.
Crab walking in.
Yeah. No, like I'm gonna be seeing Slayer again soon, And thinking of them, I'm like, I still think God Hates Us All is like a new album, and that album came out in 2001. You know, so yeah, it's funny to think back, you know, because there's like eras that like your favorite looks and stuff, but then you think back and you're like, wait, that's a long time ago. Yeah. Like they're still stuck in this.
For me, Blink-182 is perpetually in like 2002, and there's band members that don't exist anymore.
I think their sound is still pretty in 2002, though.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they very much know their sound. Yeah. They hew very closely to it.
I mean, and that's no knock on them. They know what they know what sounds good for them.
Yeah.
What'll make the money, and they don't hate it.
I've seen them live 7 times. Whew. So
I have not seen a single band live 7 times. Granted, the most I've seen a band live, or technically artist, is Dave Grohl at 3.
I've seen the Foo Fighters 3 times as well. Yeah,
I've seen Andrew WK twice.
I think 2 is as much as I've gone for seeing a band.
So Springsteen twice, and you're about to do Slayer twice.
Slayer twice, McCartney twice, Dave Grohl twice.
Which is, I mean, for all of us, it's Foo Fighters, unless you saw them on that Queen's tour.
It was the Valor thing where it was just Dave Grohl.
Oh. Okay,
yeah, because technically
that's
just
why
Dave
I
Grohl
say
for
Dave
that.
Grohl.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my bad. Yeah, because I've all 3 times I've seen him with the rest of the Foos.
What was I going to say though?
At least one of those times I was with you, or at least
all 3 of us. All 3 of us. The Wasting Light tour in 2011, November 11th.
Yeah, 11.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you and I both went to the 4th of July show too, right? At RFK.
Yeah,
where he had Hart and Joan Jett.
And Gary Clark Jr., who's fucking phenomenal on the guitar.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably, if we're talking, though I can't even call Gary Clark like fucking up and coming anymore. I mean, that dude like, sells out.
He's here.
Yeah, no, yeah. And that now on the show. God, that'd be so cool. But
he's just been waiting here for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, very polite. He's a super polite guitarist.
Still hasn't talked yet.
Yeah. But now he sells out like Merriweather and stuff,
Nice.
And he shows up in season 2 of Luke Cage, and that's how I knew. I was like, oh, we're gonna be just fine. Not Mike Coulter, who does a good job, but Gary Clark Jr. in his trademark cowboy hat playing Bright Lights in Harlem's Paradise. We are fucking aces. Who else have I've seen Green Day 3 times at this point. I've seen The Offspring like 2 or 3 times. Coldplay twice. All American Rejects like 4 times. Taking Back Sunday twice. Andrew WK.
You've got this new head filled up with smoke. I've got my veins all tangled close.
Come out, let's go. Too close.
That's my Make Damn Sure is my jam. I do love that song.
That's a good one.
And Liar. That video was cool.
If we're keeping score.
Yeah, that video was cool, man.
Yeah, that was their last like good album.
Oh, well, I don't know.
Hot take.
Yeah. Sorry, TBS fans, but no, like to bring it back to like Leahy a bit. Yeah, I mean, that's how I was introduced to that act, and so it'll be interesting to see what she's gonna do next. I'm certainly but like between them and the Japan Droids, who I both saw in Japan. Yeah, I went to Japan. That's the big news. That who I both saw at the Rock and Roll Hotel within the past month. Both those bands could put out a polka record, and I would still be there to see them live. They are so much fun, and they're so nice.
Opening for Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah. Hell, I've never actually seen Weird Al live.
He is a great show. I got to see him during the White and Nerdy tour, and it was my first time up in Atlantic City, oddly enough. It puts on a hell of a show.
I just remember like one of my buddies was really into him when I was working at Blockbuster, and he would talk about like the costume changes and like
every song has a different costume. Yeah, he it's a whole multimedia experience.
That's badass.
I think that's how he like marketed. Probably not going to do it so much anymore. Especially like he just did that self-indulgent tour where he was like, I'm going to play some of the smaller songs. It's going to be smaller venues, not nearly as much theatrics. Yeah, I'm old and I'm not in a contract anymore.
What's always, like when I saw Springsteen, it was the Devils and Dust. tour. It was just him,
Mhm.
you know, like in
No E Street Band.
No E Street Band. It was just him and a bunch of instruments, which was really freaking cool.
Yeah.
It was like his version of a coffee shop show.
Yeah, I mean, and it felt like super intimate. And then I was like, oh, I'm in the nosebleeds. That was one of the most surreal experiences. Like I've talked about before. Like I've been waiting my whole life. Like I've been a fan since I was 3.
Yeah.
And he came out on stage, and I was with
I
my
was like,
buddy.
hello, Jake.
Yeah, well, I was with my buddy, and I remember turning, and I was like, he's just a man. Like I was like, what the fuck? Like I was,
He
you
can
know,
bleed.
yeah, I thought it was.
If he can bleed, we can kill him.
I was expecting this just like, you know, like giant to come out, and he just came out, and I remember like hearing him speak, and I was like, I'm hearing him speak with my own ears, and like that. It took a while, like even more than
I'm
like.
breathing the same air.
Well, even more than like McCartney. Like when I saw McCartney, that was a big deal. It took me a couple songs to realize it, and it wasn't really until Springsteen, the last song he played, I think it was "Dream Baby Dream," which is a cover, which is really cool. It was on an organ, and he had it where like he's playing it, and then it looped. Like he had it where it just was looping over and over again, and he literally just gets up, he just walks away as it's still looping the song,
Yeah.
and he just walks away and he waves and disappeared, and that was it. And I was like, what the? I was like, it was one of the craziest experiences of my life.
For me, I think, when I saw McCartney, I saw McCartney around this time, like I guess last year, or was it 2 years ago? So iconic. It just
Well, yeah, because it was around. Yeah, I don't remember.
it was
around your birthday.
It
yeah.
was around my birthday because he played "Birthday" off the White Album, and I was just, he was like, "It's somebody's birthday out there," and I was like,
It's fucking.
"Yeah." He says that every show, but he's talking this time. This time he's talking about me.
Yeah.
And, like,
You just look at the rest of the audience. It's none of your birthdays. It's my birthday.
yeah, the vindictive McCartney. But the no, it was last year, wasn't it? Because that's right. It was 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago. I definitely remember now. Everything just kind of clicked with my brains. But I saw with my sister, who obviously got introduced to the Beatles with me because being of the same bloodline, and
relative age.
Yeah, she's only a couple of years younger, and there was just finally there. It was the perfect person to see McCartney with, because there at a certain point, it was about halfway through the set, Ann and I think it was like during "Love Me Do," because he played "Love Me Do" when I saw him.
Mm-hmm.
Which he doesn't normally do, apparently. And I turned to Anne, and she turned to me, and we were just like, oh, this guy's written the soundtrack to our lives, and he's right there. I say that, he's like on the other opposite end of the Capital One Arena, but still, like...
No, it took, like, I remember when I saw him the first time, same thing, like, it took a while. Like, it took, like, 3 or 4 songs.
Yeah.
And I remember all I could think about was, like, that guy knew John Lennon. Like that's like what kept going through my head, and then finally I was able to just kind of like enjoy the rest of it. Like my brain would not compute that shit. You know what I mean? I was like, what the fuck? Yeah, it was pretty crazy. It's always cool. Like, you know, that happened with Slayer too. Like, you know, I'd been listening to them for years and years and years, and there's always that moment. Like before I saw Kiss too. Like I was like, oh fuck! Like it hit me. I was like about to see Kiss. Kiss was crazy because it was like seeing superheroes in like real life show up. But then like as Slayer is playing, like, you know their songs are going to play or whatever. And I was like, I'm going to hear not just Raining Blood live, but I'm going to hear like the moment that I got into Slayer. They're going to play that moment live.
Here's a question. Before you guys see a rock band, do you purposely avoid or purposely binge on that music before you see them?
I don't know if it's like I think about it like super hardcore, but, I like to. I guess I'd lean more towards not listening to them. Like, if there's some stuff, like I saw Arcade Fire when they released The Suburbs, and so I didn't know that album that well. Like I knew Funeral, their first album, which is still like one of the best fucking albums ever. And I knew was the second one Neon Bible? Is that the name of the second one? I know the song. Yeah, I think it is. I love that song. Neon Bible, Neon Bible. Such a cool song. Yeah, so I listened to like The Suburbs a lot because I was like, I want to know the songs. But I guess I would lean more towards like not. I guess because you kind of want to.
I too tend to avoid, not like actively. Like if I'm going with friends and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna listen to the album on the way to the venue." Okay, cool. You know, I'm not gonna be like, "No, fuck off." But like, yeah, like I'm going to see, this band perform. It's almost like, I mean, not to say like I'm going to sully the experience by listening to the album that they put out, but like I kind of want that to be a whole experience in and itself. So yeah, I'll usually like a day or two before I'll be like, okay, like a lot of times like I'll listen to something like ramping up to it, but then around a day or two before, like I'm like, okay, I want to go into this like almost as if I have fresh ears,
Yeah, I mean, that's totally, I get that.
No, I mean, I've seen it both ways. That's why, because I've tried it both ways. Nowadays, I try to like psych myself up.
Mm-hmm.
The last couple shows. Oh, that's not even true. I was going to say the last couple shows were like spur of the moment. The only show this year that's been spur of the moment was the Arctic Monkeys show. Because I wasn't that keen on the latest album. But then after I saw them, I was like, oh, that's right. I believe in rock and roll. They make even the songs I don't particularly care for on the record really work.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to like psych my, so like when I'm going to, driving to Rock and Roll Hotel or taking a lift or whatever, I'll listen to the album. Or when I'm watching The Godfather. Though I with Rock and Roll Hotel, they've got like the coolest bar soundtrack. Like it's just they try to lean into their name, so they're like, oh, we're just gonna play Zeppelin and AC/DC and fucking like all the like 70s and 80s shit that people love. And I was like, they played like solo Ozzy. I was like, all right, cool. But no, I generally like, so when they come out on stage, I'm like prepared. I'm like, fucking,
I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
That's the funniest shit. I heard Enter Sandman, and I was like, I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, my body's ready. Do you ever have that fantasy that your favorite acts invite you on? You both did like the Australian head tilt when I said that. But did you?
Jane Doe.
Yeah. Do you ever have the fantasy that you get invited to play on stage
Every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had it today. I was like taking a shower and like jamming the like music, and I was like, you just like jam the music and stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm on stage. Fucking going. I was actually listening to Slayer, so I guess I am listening to Slayer before the a week before the show, or whatever. So
yeah.
Fuck me. No, but that happens all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I go to a concert, no matter who's playing,
I'm in the nosebleeds, but this time,
yeah, I've probably, what helps reinforce that is Green Day likes to pick people from the audience to play.
Food too.
Yeah.
You seen that video of the guy in the Kiss makeup?
Yeah.
Fucking
oh,
awesome.
God, that was so good.
So I'm always like, this time they'll ask me to play Welcome to Paradise.
I really tried to be the kid they put for the drums.
Yeah.
For when the Green Day did it the one time I went and saw them, the Green Day. Too,
Yeah.
But alas, they chose somebody else.
Yeah. And that, because I was also at that show, the audience participation song for that particular show was a cover of Operation Ivy's Knowledge. Because my memory is ridiculous.
Yeah. I did not remember that.
Okay. You guys got anything else to add before we pop this one off?
Pop this one off. Does that mean starting it? It sounds like it's starting.
Yeah, that sounds like start it.
Like, pop it off. Like, fire it off into the night.
No, please keep trying to explain why that means ending it.
Hey guys, we pop it off.
We're popping it off. Let's pop it off. You guys want to pop it off? We'll pop it off. Okay. No, I got nothing, man.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Let's pop it off.
Let's pop it off. It's been another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake. Thank you very much.
Good night, Eric Bana.
Pop. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual Catching Up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.